What's up, Trailblazers? This is Caleb, and today I have for you a build and summon guide for Luka. Even though I'm not planning to pull for Kafka, I'm planning to get myself a copy of Luka. I think he's an extremely strong and flexible support who will be relevant for a long time. Let's first break down Luka's kit. There's a lot of moving parts and he's not super easy to understand at first. His skill is probably the simplest part of his kit. It's a single target attack that applies a bleed dot to the enemy. The upfront damage is low, but the dot damage is very high. It's comparable to Sampo when he fully stacks his dots on one target. The dot duration is 3 turns, which is quite long, so you don't need to refresh the dot frequently. His A2 trace empowers his skill to dispel a buff from the target enemy, much like Pele's skill. Next up is Luka's ultimate. It's a single target nuke that does respectable damage, although it is not as damaging as Yukon's ult. The special part of Luka's ult is that it applies a debuff on the enemy that increases the damage it receives for 3 turns. It's important to note that this is not the same as defense reduction. Instead, this debuff increases the overall damage taken by the enemy. The energy cost is quite high at 130 energy, but he has abilities that help him recover that energy faster. Now we get to the spicy part of Luka's kit, his enhanced basic attack and fighting will. When Luka has 2 or more stacks of fighting will, he can spend 2 stacks of it to launch an enhanced basic attack. The enhanced attack consists of 3 hits of direct punch and 1 hit of rising uppercut. His A6 trace allows direct punch a 50% chance to trigger an additional hit. This means he can get up to 6 hits of direct punch in a single enhanced attack. On average, it'll be 4.5 hits. The multiple hits from his enhanced basic attack makes Luka an excellent physical weakness breaker. He's like Asta, but for physical weakness. On top of all that, rising uppercut triggers the bleed dot on the enemy to do even more damage. Luka doesn't need Kafka to trigger his dot damage early. He can do it all by himself. How does Luka get stacks of fighting will? That comes from his talent. He starts the battle with 1 stack. If he uses his technique, Luka gets an additional stack. His basic attack and skill each give him 1 stack as well. His ultimate gives him 2 stacks. He can have a maximum of 4 stacks of fighting will, so you can only save up to 2 enhanced basic attacks. Playing Luka requires you to manage his fighting will stacks if you want to maximize his potential. To make things super easy for you, 2 uses of his basic attack or skill and 1 use of his ult allows Luka to do 2 enhanced basic attacks. An example of his rotation is this. He uses his ult and then uses his skill to get 3 stacks. He then uses an enhanced basic attack to go down to 1 stack. After that, he uses a skill or basic to go back up to 2 stacks. And lastly, he spends those 2 stacks on another enhanced attack. Luka has a trace that helps him recover 3 energy whenever he gains a stack of fighting will. In my rotation, he would have recovered 12 energy. Now that we learned how Luka works, we face the big question. Should you summon for Luka? If you're planning to make a Kafka dot team, you get him on the way and he'll be an easy fit in your dot team. But what if you're not planning to build a dot team? Is he still worth it? The answer in my opinion is still a strong yes. Luka is fully operational at E0, so you don't need to pull for extra copies. He's the best physical breaker in the game at the moment. He breaks even faster than Susheng. Luka brings a lot of utility as well as damage. Having a buff dispel is an important part of any roster. I have Lotra already, and even then I want another dispeller for team comp flexibility. His bleed dot has a high base damage and he can proc it by himself, which allows him to do a lot of damage without much investment, as well as be self-sufficient. Lastly, Luka's ult debuff is relevant for any team, and because he's not skill hungry, he can fit easily in anywhere. The one scenario where I hesitate to pull for Luka is if you have a fully built Pela and you don't plan to make a dot team. When I said that Luka was fully operational at E0, I meant it. All his Eidolons help Luka do more damage, but his utility is entirely contained in his base form. The extra damage buffs are good, but I don't think they're worth spending your summons on, unless you plan to go all the way to E6. For his traces, I recommend prioritizing his basic and skill because that's where his damage comes from. Upgrading his ult is good for increasing the value of his debuff. And his talent is the least important because each level does not increase very much and is only for his dot proc damage. There are 2 standout Lightcones for Luka, Goodnight Sleep Well and Resolution Shines. Goodnight Sleep Well increases damage when attacking debuffed enemies. Its condition is very easy to meet and damage increase is significant. Resolution Shines applies a defense down debuff on Luka's attacks. It helps make Luka an even better support and it's easy to apply because his enhanced basic attack has so many chances to get a successful hit. There are many other viable Lightcones that increase Luka's damage, but they're not as good as Goodnight Sleepwell. And Resolution Shines is the only Nihility support Lightcone that works well for him, because he doesn't need effect hit rate from his Lightcone. The best relic set for Luka is the Boxing Relic set, because it gives him physical damage and attack. However, Luka is a flexible character without many requirements, so you can mix and match 2-piece bonuses from Boxing, Musketeer, and Hackerspace sets. At the end of the day, you're just looking for speed and attack. Speed is good because he can charge up his fighting spirit and trigger his dots faster. And you want attack for dot damage scaling. Consequently, you want Space Sealing Station for his ornament set for more attack bonus. For main stats, you're looking for attack on chest, speed on boots, physical damage on sphere, and attack on rope. For substats, you're looking for speed and attack. And don't forget about survivability. Luka is tankier than Ting Yun, but you don't want him to get one shot. Luka wants only a little bit of effect hit rate, so that's why you don't want to run an effect hit rate Lightcone or a main stat chest. This is because his skill and ultimate have a high 100% base hit rate. Against endgame enemies with 40% resistance, he needs 40% total hit rate to land 84% of the time. His trace includes 18% effect hit rate, so you're only looking for around 20% from his relic substats. I also did some investigation into NG region rope for Luka. The goal is to have a smooth rotation for generating fighting will and have a 100% uptime on this ultimate debuff. The table I'm showing you simulates a skill point neutral rotation. You can see that Luka has 117 energy at the end of the rotation. If he gets attacked once or twice, he will have enough energy to charge his ultimate without needing a regen rope. If you use Luka as a support and want him to be skill point positive, the situation slightly changes. At the end of his rotation, he only has 107 energy without using a regen rope. However, with a rope, he can achieve his ultimate threshold easily with this rotation. This does not necessarily mean that Luka needs an energy regen rope if he wants to be skill point positive. He can extend his rotation with another basic attack and get 130 energy on his 5th action. As long as Luka is fast enough to get in 5 actions for every 3 actions of the enemy, he can still maintain an 100% debuff uptime. So the energy regen rope is only needed if your Luka is slow and wants to be skill point positive. And lastly, we get to team comps for Luka. Naturally, he's a good fit for Kafka dot teams because of his high dot damage and added utility. Luka is also good with other Nihility carries like Welt in a dual carry comp because the Goodnight Sleepwell Lightcone is extremely good. Stacking debuffs is also a fun playstyle to build around. Luka can also fit in as a physical weakness breaker in pretty much any team comp. He's skill point friendly and self-sufficient. And did I forget to mention that his skill and ultimate brings a lot of utility. I picked Blade and Susheng as characters Luka can work well with. Luka helps add to the single target damage for Blade teams, and Blade can take advantage of Luka's debuff. Luka and Susheng will absolutely demolish any physical weak enemy. Luka can break their toughness quickly to empower Susheng's attacks. I hope this guide was helpful to you in understanding Luka and how to use him. This is one of my longer guides. I'm turning into Mr. Poke. Shout out to one of my favorite creators in the space. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.